We now start our second session, plenary session today. This session is in memory of Professor Joost Kalker, who spent his whole career at Delft University of Technology. And Joost passed away in 2006, and afterwards Professor Ken Johnson wrote an obituary. And then in Brisbane, at the Contact Mechanics 2006 in Brisbane, Stuart Grassi gave appreciation of Joost. In 2007, Aaron Schwab and Mrs. Kalker, who is here today, wrote also a tribute to Professor Kalker, published in the Proceedings of the American Society of Mechanical Engineering, 2006 International Design Engineering Technical Conferences, and the Computers and the Information in Engineering Conferences, held in September 4th to 7th, 2007 in Las Vegas, the US. Today, we have Mrs. Kalker and his daughter Ticia here in memory of Joost. So, Kalki, and may I invite you to the lectern for some words, please? Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, please. Okay, yes, please.
Thank you for your introduction, Professor Zilili. And I also thank you for inviting me to this conference. Probably I visited more conferences on contact mechanics than most of you. So actually I feel very much at home in this company. Okay, is it okay like this? Okay, thank you. Well, this session we will hear about Joost's life maybe and about his work. And I was a witness of that since 1957, when we both worked at the railway company of the Netherlands. So that's a long time ago, and we had met before, and we more or less liked each other already. I won't go into that. I had the pleasure to be a witness of his work since then, and we worked there as students for a researcher, Ton de Pater, his name is. And he died, about the same time as Joost, I think. He was older. And he later became, after guiding us, a professor in mechanical engineering at the university. Well, to keep a long story short, Joost was appointed a professor in the Department of Mathematics. And I now come to the next generation of professors, which is Professor Lee, who on Thursday will give his inaugural speech, and I'm going to attempt it, and I think many of you will do that too. I want to describe to you, we met Lee in China when we were there for lectures, and I come back to that. I go back in history all the time. But we met Lee in Holland. I saw him for the first time on a sunny Sunday morning when I looked into my front garden, and there was a handsome young man in the grass sitting with an enormous piece of luggage, enormous trunk. And it was rather early in the morning, so I said to Joost, well, there is a man in the garden, but who is he? And well, that's Lee. And then he was going to work for Joost, and he had, after a long journey, had reached our home. And he was very tired, we could see that. And Joost let him in and brought him to the bathroom to take a shower. And well, we gave him breakfast, and he was really exhausted. And we gave him the guest room. He had a good day of sleep, I think. You remember?
Yes. Sure.
Okay. And, well, of course, we had met Lee before in China, when we went there for not a holiday, but for a hard month of working, where we gave both lectures. And he guided us through all the difficulties we had. One thing was he spoke Chinese fluently, which we don't, of course. And we had a lot of bags and luggage, 11 pieces, I think, when we arrived. And he attended our luggage, and he ran to and fro on platforms, stairs, elevators, and guided us through various universities. And we also did a lot of sightseeing. It was a wonderful time. We had to work very hard there. We started at 7 o'clock in the morning to give our lectures. And the reason that we had so many luggage was because at that time we did not have our information on a small stick, which you do in the computer. We had those piles of overhead sheets. The elder people will remember them, I think. So we had to carry all those lectures with us. But Lee was really very helpful. We were helpless without him. Thank you, Lee, after all those years. I won't go into all the adventures we had with him and without him, but later he came to Holland to do his PhD with Joost. And Joost was very careful he was very selective in choosing his students. Of course, they choose him, but he was very selective too, and he picked out the best. And he really was one of the best. And Joost will be very proud now that you are a professor in civil engineering department. So I'm sure you will give a lift to the history and the research into contact mechanics to a very high level, and you make it more popular with the students, I think, and I can see that now. Okay, I wish you a long and happy life.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Corky, yes. Thank you, Corky, for the nice words, and thank you, and thank Tisha for being here. Now let's move forward. And about the work of Joost, then Professor Johnson gave a very good overview. So let's go through it. Joost's PhD dissertation on the rolling contact of two elastic bodies in the presence of dry friction was a real magnum opus. It established for all time the mechanics of friction rolling contact on the arbitrary combinations of tangential force and spin, which govern the curving and the dynamical stability of railway vehicles. His results are used by the railway dynamicists worldwide. In 1979, he presented a state-of-the-art paper, Survey of Wheel-Rail Rolling Contact Theory. He developed his simplified theory. He was the first to tackle the transient rolling contact problem that follows a sudden change of imposed force or under the action of an oscillating force. He developed a variation method for solution of frictional rolling. These works were brought together in the book, Three-Dimensional Elastic Bodies in Rolling Contact. By combining Archard's wear law with rolling contact mechanics, Kalker and his students predicted the wear of wheels and rails. And when I was preparing this slide, I did some quick Googling. And the keywords were Kalker coefficient. It turned out to be 58,000 counting. And then I did also the Kalker theory. That was then 49,000. And I'm not sure if I'm correct, but certainly then Joost was one of the first person who worked on numerical analysis of contact mechanics. And of course, as Ken Johnson said, his work has been widely applied to railway vehicle dynamics, later on to wear, and now also to rolling contact fatigue. And there are many more to mention. And in 1998, when I was at a conference, then suddenly a German professor came up to me and saying, then, hey, you're a student of Professor Kalker. He is the Pope of the area. So now, just now, Professor Johnson said, Joost was the first to tackle the rolling on the sudden change of force. Let's now see then his solution. This process basically consists of putting, for instance, a wheel or an arbitrary body which can roll on, for instance, rail or a surface. So this is then frictional compression. And if you push, then it will first shift in this way, and then it starts roll. So this is then the process of compression, shift, and the rolling. So this is the results from the book of Joost. We skip then the compression process. So what we have now is then already shift. And then start the transient rolling until the steady state setting. This solution is quick, elegant, by means of boundary element method. Nowadays, we could also have finite element solution. So now we put the wheel on the rail. So this is then pressure builds up, and now we push. So now shift, and then the tangential stress build up, and now it stops, it arose. What we see is then the typical contact solution of frictional rolling. The tangential stress build up. Now, then the largest shear stress is at the rear. And what I said then, the solution by the method of Joost, it takes a small fraction of a second. And when we are trying to obtain this solution, it takes a few hours. But basically then the results are the same.